Hello my friends, and with our first story. So a few years ago, my now ex-wife filed a false restraining order against me. She was living with her boyfriend as we were getting a divorce, and had decided that a false restraining order was an excellent way to be awarded full possession of the car that I had purchased. Now we only had one key to the car, and she was in possession of both the key and the vehicle. This is important for later. Now I was exceedingly upset that she had knowingly filed a false restraining order, and upon being served, I immediately submitted my appeal and request for a hearing. I contacted my company, had the prints of all my Department of Transportation GPS logs, as well as company internal vehicle tracker data. I also printed out my personal GPS tracking data from the navigation system I was using. So not only did I have accredited logs showing exactly where I was, or more importantly, where I was not. I also had two very detailed systems information showing my exact speed, cardinal direction, and other information recorded, and 2-minute and 30-second intervals. After I compiled my entire body of evidence, I wrote a 3-page testimony to read in court to assist in explaining the entirety of the data, as well as present my side of the appeal. Almost 30 days passes, and I realized that upon adjournment of the case, there's a chance that I'll be able to reach my vehicle before my ex does. Now, with this in mind, I decided to contact the dealership from which I purchased the vehicle and acquired a second key. Now, as we only received one key when we purchased the vehicle, I knew she wouldn't expect me to be able to drive away with it. So fast forward a few days to the court date. I had driven across 2 states to attend this court judgment appeal with all my paperwork, written testimony, and the key to the vehicle. I arrive approximately 4 hours prior to the end, patiently wait for the magic moment to come, and I got bad news. It was extremely anticlimactic. She was a no-show. The judge ruled in my favor, and the restraining order was dismissed. So the judge then asked if I had anything further for the courts, and if not, I was free to go. So I very politely asked, "Your Honor, is it my understanding that the restraining order is lifted?" The judge replies, "Yes." I then asked, "So am I at this time able to retrieve my vehicle?" The judge then tells me, "As the judge of the courtroom, I'm unable to provide you with any form of legal advice." Now, I was about to apologize when the judge then said, "However, if you find a seat in the back of my courtroom, I will get someone to provide you with a signed order of dismissal for the restraining order. If you were to be questioned by law enforcement for any reason regarding property or contact, it's best to have this documentation on your person, as the cancellation of the order might not reach the police system until close of business today." Now, the way in which the judge had worded her response was very clear in intent. She could not specifically tell me that I was good to retrieve my vehicle, but she was taking the extra time to provide me with all the paperwork that gave me the legal opportunity to retrieve my vehicle. So I sat down, and after nearly 10 minutes, the court official that was designated with the task of typing and printing the paperwork got the judge's signature on it and brought it to me as I turned to leave the courtroom. The judge calls out to me, "Yes, Your Honor. Good luck." So at this point, I had to formulate a plan. See, as the ex-wife had not been present for the court proceedings, neither was my vehicle. Now I have the address for her boyfriend's parents' house, as it was all over the initial restraining order's list of protected properties. I decided to utilize Uber to go to the address and check if the vehicle was present at the so upon starting the trip, I requested that the Uber driver wait for me at the address after dropping me off, giving her a quick summary of my circumstances, and planned to ensure that I had a witness present for the intended retrieval of my vehicle. Quite simply, to ensure that no false allegations of fictitious activities during the recovery of said vehicle would have a leg to stand upon in court. Now, the lady Uber driver was sympathetic to my cause and agreed, even going as far as to give me her personal contact information in the event that I required her for future court appearances. Now, upon the arrival at the address, the vehicle was indeed present. The lady waits until I acquired the vehicle, left the premises, and then she followed me for about 2 miles to witness that I had left the property completely, and then she went on her way. Bless that lady, she was a saint. So I make it about half an hour away and my phone rings. I answer it, and it was my ex-wife's boyfriend, and as you can imagine, he was not happy. He starts to swear at me, making random, insulting comments, which I entirely brushed off. And then he makes a very large, unintelligent mistake. He said, "If I ever see you again here or anywhere, I will blow your head off. Count yourself dead." Now, I'm a veteran, and I don't take very kindly on threats to my life. I was upset at him. I was upset at her, and I was just handed a gift-wrapped means of complete and utter destructive revenge. I immediately hung up with him and dialed 911 to report a verbal threat on my life. I go to the parking lot of the local big box store to meet the responding officer and ensure that I didn't leave until I had a case number attached, written statement, and the reporting officer's identification information. I completed my trip to my home state, and the following Monday, as this all happened on Friday, I went to my local courthouse and filed for an emergency restraining order. The judge that was available to hear my case was, interestingly enough, the same judge handling the divorce. She listened to the case I provided, reviewed the police information I provided, and then she issued the requested restraining order. Now, this doesn't sound like ProRevenge, does it? Well, my ex-wife was living with the guy in his parents' basement. The restraining order issued by the judge protected myself, my property, and my spouse from him. See, we were still legally married, so I was legally able to list her as my protected party when the restraining order was served. He could not be within 600 feet of my ex-wife, and as she lived with him in his parents' basement, he wasn't the one who had to leave. She was, but she no longer had my vehicle, so she lost her brand new job. She also wasn't able to get to school as her commute was quite long by public transit, so she failed her college course, but was stuck with the student loans for it anyway. So she was now homeless, a vehicle-less job, less kicked out of her college for non-attendance, penniless, as she was atrociously bad with finances. And to top it all off, she was nearly 4 months pregnant with his kid. So the moral of the story, don't piss off a veteran. I don't want to play games. I will go out of my way to avoid playing games. I will bend over backwards to make sure that I don't have to play games. But if you forced my hand into playing aforementioned games, I will not be the one that loses the game. Which is something I told her verbatim on our 3rd or 4th date, but I guess she forgot. Guys, what an absolute savage revenge. Listen, the restraining order on the wife's boyfriend that led to her downfall was absolutely brilliant. Play them games, win them prizes, guys. OPI does come into the comment section to give details about what happened after, and it's some juicy, juicy stuff, guys. So listen up now. My wife did not show up to the next 2 divorce court dates as she had no vehicle and was maybe 2 or 3 states away at the time. It went into judge mediation, which she did so far, and she was very nasty. That's a whole story in and of itself though. So the ex refused to do any mediation and eventually the judge became the mediator. So on her final court date, the judge asked us what we both want and talked to us about our request on the floor and then went to chambers to make her decision. So I came to court with my entire credit history printed with every debt I wanted split highlighted, as well as a few pages that I had written so I could explain to the judge why I felt it was appropriate to split these specific debts. I also had paperwork I wanted the judge to sign, which would have my ex removed from any financial claim in the vehicle as I was the one who filed for the divorce. I spoke first and I got nearly everything I asked for when it was my ex's turn. It wasn't very close to the following. Ex says I want $5,000 for any property of mine that might have been damaged, stolen, or sold throughout the course of the relationship. The judge then says, "Okay, please provide the receipts to the bailiff for me to review in the chambers." The ex said, "I don't have any receipts." The judge then says, "If you have no receipts, I have no ability to order a reimbursement. What else are you asking for?" Ex then goes, "I would like for Oppie to pay my student loans since it was Oppie's fault that I had to quit college." The judge then said, "You were in college less than 6 months. You started college after leaving your spouse and it wouldn't do the community, the courts, nor your spouse any benefit for me to do that. What else are you asking for?" My ex then goes on and says, well, I want the restraining order to be lifted. I haven't been able to see my boyfriend in a few months because of it. The judge says this is a divorce settlement hearing, not a restraining order appeal hearing. I cannot make any ruling in regards to that order in the court at this time. When I do come back from chambers, the divorce will be finalized. You will no longer be the spouse and the order will no longer be applicable anyway. What else are you asking for? I would like alimony to the fullest amount allowed. My spouse has completely ruined my financial situation and has a full-time job, so was responsible for getting me back on my feet. The judge then said, you mentioned you have or you had a boyfriend. My ex then said, yes, Your Honor, I have a boyfriend. This restraining order made it so I couldn't live with him anymore. The judge then said, so you were romantically cohabiting with your boyfriend prior to the order being served. So my ex then replied, yes, and that was a huge mistake. The judge then says, under the laws of the state, redacted, since you have admitted to the court that you romantically cohabitate extramarital, you are not eligible for any alimony and this court cannot order your ex to provide you any financial assistance. So in conclusion, I got everything I asked for and the ex was making stupid demands and she was entirely shut down by the judge. I had to give the ex 3 boxes of her property and nothing else. Almost 3 years of marriage and all she walked away from it were with 2 boxes of random things and 1 box that had her grandmother's dinnerware and several $1,000s of debt. My friends Opie coming into the comments and providing us with the details of the court hearing is the cherry on top of this beautiful revenge. I wish I could have been there to see the ex-wife's face as the judge denied her request for alimony. Oh my goodness. She literally got nothing. Now to start, this is about the company I worked for and a trip I took because I had to wire a building for a computer network because the building owner wouldn't. Our company was moving a remote site to a new building and as the IT guy for the company, I was asked to look at the new building and set up some network parts. Now the landlord refused to put in any low voltage lines and we got quotes but they were thousands of dollars. Answer me my car and 4 boxes of Cat 6 cable. Now it's about an 8-hour drive and I was doing about 30 drops, not a ton, but still a few days worth of work and built up and it's a drop ceiling with insulation on top, messy and itchy work. So the story day 1, we get there Monday morning at the start of the month. Now it's actually a cool summer morning and we're from the south so nobody notices the AC not working for about an hour. Slowly the building begins heating up. It gets to 80 degrees by noon, 85 degrees by 3 p.m. There are rooms with floor to ceiling. Windows are greenhouses. It's an absolutely miserable time. We've been told by workers still on site that the leasing company was told that there was no AC in the building 3 weeks ago. The other thing is there are still workers on site. The building isn't completed so much for being ready for a handover on day 1. Day 2, we're getting agitated. It's about 80 degrees in the AM when we first walk in and it's sweltering. The other guy that came in with me is the facilities manager. He's screaming at people over the phone to fix the AC. We're all exhausted from the heat by 3 p.m. I found a 4-foot hole in the ducts when I was opening the ceiling tile. The AC was blowing but there was no cold air. We are told the compressor is broken. Day 3, more of the same. It's a miserable morning. I'm finally getting the last lines punched in on the patch panel. The AC guys arrive at about 10 a.m. They finally fix the unit at 2 p.m. We asked them what they did. They said a lot of things. We again said, what did you do? And the reply was, we can't tell the tenants. Now that was a red flag alert. We contacted our realtor and she said she'd look into what was done. Now she sent me an email later that night that says that they changed the refrigerant from R22 to R410A. I then told the facilities guy, no way dude. That's like putting gas in a diesel motor. They would have to change out the entire system. They didn't do that in 4 hours. They basically duct taped and WD-40 that thing back together and it'll run poorly for about a replacement. Day number 4, there's still no running water system. Some areas still workers on site and the AC can't keep up with a noonday sun and it still hits around about 80 degrees by the end of the day. The AC runs continuously. We're packing up all the stuff. We moved and we're moving out. I then noticed that all the fire sprinklers looked like they've been moved and the metal protection around the drop tile has fallen to the floor. I also noticed that the sprinklers were no longer protruding from the tiles in places and in others. They're quite a bit lower than they were. Yep, the AC fools stood on the fire sprinklers to fix their lousy ductwork. Now we are looking for a friendly way out. We contact the landlord and say you haven't delivered a finished building. We're moving out. The lease is broken. The landlord then has a 36-page lease. The landlord won't let us out of the lease and we're locked in for 5 years. This is not starting off well. So we then get in contact with a corporate lawyer and the realtor and they both agree that we're kind of screwed. We're actually desperate for any way out. I start looking at the fire system as I used to run all kinds of low-voltage lines, fire security, etc. And there is no fire panel in our portion of the building. No smoke detectors are hooked up to anything, which are more red flags. One of our employees that was moving the heavy gear says, "Oh yeah, I meant to mention that I never saw any building permits anywhere." Ding, ding, ding. They did this build-out including demolition, running new plumbing and power lines, and destroying the fire system without a city permit. Cue the call to the city inspector's office. Day number 5. Now I wasn't here for this part, but the facilities manager told me this. He said the city inspector pulled the permits for the building and there weren't any. He finds multiple violations of city code red-tagged our area and removed the certificate of occupancy. When I told him to check out the fire system like you said, he just goes, "Oh no, 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 I have to make a call." He then calls the fire marshal. Day number 8, the fire arrives on scene. They find no active alarm system in our portion of the building, which is another red flag. They then find a sprinkler riser for the entire building in the area and no water pressure. He then condemned the entire building. So basically they wouldn't let us out of the building because we signed a lease, even though they never delivered a building in any semblance of working order. I called the building inspector, got them smoked, who then called the fire marshal, who then condemned the entire building. They are still trying to fight us over it, but we're pushing them for not only refunding our deposit and the rent, which they've already done, but for the time spent moving the gear in and out and all the wiring. Now our lawyer says that they don't have a leg to stand on and he's happy for them to pay his fees as well. Okay, my friends, first off, that sounded like a horrendous 5 days of being inside a building with no AC. You guys know how I love reading stories about shady landlords getting their just desserts? No guys, having the building condemned isn't enough. The landlord deserves to have all of his properties taken away. Doing this without a permit and not being up to the fire code is literally putting people in danger. Like if he does this to commercial buildings, who knows what this guy does to people who rent houses, condos, apartments, or whatever. So I have a really bad leg. I've had 13 surgeries. It's a long story. And I just started at a new school. So after the first 3 weeks, I had to go in for another procedure on my leg. Not that big a deal to me. I've been here before. Upon my return, I had documentation of my restrictions as well as special amenities that were required. So the victory was that I needed extra time to get from class to class. I also must have someone escort me. And I needed unrestricted access to the elevator. Now all of these got me recurring problems, such as constant harassment by teachers and security about my being in the halls during class time. And why was my cousin out to these first 2 were annoying, but easy enough to deal with. Now the real issue was the elevator. I was told multiple times that for security issues, I could not have a personal key due to it, sharing the same functionality with the interior door keys. I would have never had any issues with this. As I was told, there would always be someone on the same floor as my classes to open the elevator for me. This of course was untrue about 75% of the time. The lack of elevator access meant that I was always stuck in the halls when other students were going class to class. I was constantly late due to having to wait for someone to come by and open the door for the elevator. This also meant that I would sometimes be stuck waiting through the entire lunch period. And due to my absences, could not afford to simply go to lunch after the fact. After about 3 weeks of this, I was tired of not getting to eat lunch during lunch. So I did one of the stupidest things I could have attempted and tried to use the stairs. Now for context, I was not on crutches. I was on a full-blown walker. About halfway down, I fell hard. One of my friends found me, got someone to help pick me up and carried me to the office. When getting to the office, they managed to get me to calm down enough to give them my mom's phone number. Now my mom is quite hot-tempered, but can keep a level head normally. When she heard that I fell, she was there in record time. When she got there, she immediately asked what happened. I told her that I was sick and tired of missing lunch from waiting for someone to open the elevator. So I tried to use the stairs, and that was a big mistake as that set off a sour bomb-sized explosive. She immediately turns around and demanded for the principal and the VP to get their asses in here ASAP. As soon as the principal and the vice principal walked in, she started berating them in a fashion not suitable for most adults there, let alone kids. And when the VP made an offhand remark about my condition, she physically went after the VP and was swarmed by local sheriffs that provided security for the school. We were escorted out, and after looking at the file and realizing my cousin and I had the same addresses, they figured out that I didn't actually live there. Now my grandmother's address was listed for me as she looked after me after I left school up until around 8 p.m. She was also raising my cousin after an issue between her and my aunt. They used this as grounds to expel me as I was out of the school district and then told her I can be some other school's problem now. I was then enrolled at the school near my house and had to have yet another surgery to repair the damage that was done as the result of my fault and redo the work of the previous procedure. I had gotten multiple statements from teachers as well as my doctors, and my parents were moving forward with a lawsuit naming the VP principal and the county school board. We were contacted by a lawyer who had won multiple cases against our school board, some of which went to the state Supreme Court, and he told us he would take our case pro bono. He was getting tired of going against the board and thought a case like this would be what it took to try and fix their crap. So fast forward 9 months. I was walking out of the court with a settlement to cover all my procedures as well as a written confirmation that the school would be going through a complete administrative overhaul and that the principal and vice principal would be let go and have their administrative credentials revoked in our state. My friends. And that brings us to another end of our /ProRevenge. I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you.